Well, welcome back to the True Roots podcast, where men find their true identity in Christ through surrender and obedience. And I'm excited to be back for another week with Dan Cox here.
I know it's been too long.
It has been too long. Yeah. We had a little week lapse there for we'll just call it life. Yeah, not my scheduling. We'll call it life.
Excuse life.
Yeah, exactly. So as we were here, we had a different idea of what we were going to talk about this week.
Yeah.
But as we were talking off camera, and it's our podcast, we were talking about discipleship and what that looks like. And that many times, I think one of the things that you were talking about is discipleship is not that we need to pull people along or tell them to go do this or those kind of things, but more so living life and bringing people along with us. That was something that you had just said. And so why don't we just start there and then just see where it goes?
Yeah, I'll just share the story I was talking about. Because this is kind of a new thought for me also that I stumbled on, and so I'm meeting with this younger guy and hearing his story. And I am also, the Lord's working on me like, hey, go be an evangelist in this setting that you're in, which is where I play basketball. And so I have this goal this year of inviting them all to church or to a men's group or just a one-on-one breakfast coffee thing. And I was sharing that goal with this younger guy, and because he plays basketball with me also, and invited him to either like do it with me or hold me accountable. And he was, kind of like smiling and nodding. It's like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Cool. Mm-hmm. And then I left, and he was like, probably in the next 20 minutes after I left, he was texting me like, I think we should talk to this guy. He should be invited. He needs Jesus. This is why. And he was like, the wheels were turning in his mind, and he was starting to apply it. And I realized like, this is discipleship. Is not sitting there like counseling him, because I'd done that so much when I did the college ministry stuff, and I do think that that's a lot of what discipleship has turned into is like, let's sit down and talk about your problems, and then try to come up with solutions. But like this, for this guy, it's like, oh no, I'm gonna go make disciples. That's what Jesus has commissioned us to do. Come with me. Come do it with me. You don't have to do it on your own like initiative either. You just come participate in this with me. And as you do, you grow. And then we make more disciples. And I was like, wow, this is genius. And then I realized this is just Jesus's way. Yeah. This is what Jesus did with the disciples. He was like, hey, I'm about my Father's business. Come do it with me. It wasn't, there was, and along the way, there were like the counseling sessions, and like working on their heart and that. But like mostly it was like, let's just go do what God's asking us to do. Anyway, so that's what I was sharing. And what I've been thinking about is like, I should just be inviting people to do this stuff with me. And then I have accountability built in too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what's interesting with that too is I think a lot of times, especially I would say in our culture, church culture, like, let's go have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Let's go sit down. Let's go talk about it.
Which
is enjoyable. That's good. Those things aren't bad.
Yeah.
So don't take it that way. It's good.
Yeah.
And many times discipleship, especially with what Jesus did with the disciples, is walk with me.
Yeah.
Come with me. I'm going to go here. We're going to go here. Come with me. Mm-hmm. And then they got to see what he did. And then he'd say, go and do likewise.
Yeah.
And through that process, he was discipling them. He was teaching them, but he just had them go do what he did and walk with him. And I think that that's a critical piece in discipleship. And you'll hear it a lot where people will say, people will watch your actions and not your words. And it's very true, especially in parenting. You talk about your 5 kids, my one kiddo. Yeah, exactly. It's true. Like I can tell my kid many different things, but if I'm not doing it, he's not going to do it. But if I do it, a story that I'll share recently is that I actually just posted this, is that he's starting to read his Bible on his own in the morning. Pretty exciting thing as a dad to watch. Pretty nice. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
But this was a long process. And previously in my story, he was watching TV in the mornings, all of these things. I'm sleeping, all of this stuff. Well, as I changed my habits, and I started reading the Bible in the morning, I just brought him alongside with me to the point now where he chooses it without me saying anything.
Yeah.
But that's discipleship.
Yeah.
And it's a similar thing to what you're saying is, and I think another piece of this too is that we can't disciple the people in things that we're not doing. So we've got to be we have to be following Jesus ourselves as well. And I think that's a big piece in discipleship is, I mean, obviously it's a big piece in discipleship, but what I mean by it is that you can't lead people down a path that you're not walking. And so if I want to help people walk towards Jesus, I got to be walking towards Jesus and learning to follow him. And that's really where leadership comes from and discipleship comes from, is from following Jesus. And then as we walk that, we say, hey, come with us and let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's reminding me of, I read this book last year. I think it's called Intentional Fathers by John Tyson.
Yeah.
Which for me in the season of life it's like teenage is a lot of the practical application. And I've got a 7-year-old as my oldest son. So it was a little bit like ahead of where we're at. But the thing I remember that he kind of outlined was the, I don't know what he called it, but I'll call it the discipleship model, which is, there's 5 steps. And the first step is, I do, you watch. I do, you help. You do, I help. You do, I watch. You do, you teach someone else, or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it was the 5th step.
Yeah.
And this is how things get applied. And the thing that's compelling about that is like, oh, the first step is you are just watching me do it, right? Like you're not involved in the doing, you're watching me do it. And he gave examples in the book that were useful. And thinking about this in the context of discipleship and evangelism, because like at the end of the day, this is going to maybe rub, I don't know what you think about this actually.
Interesting. Okay.
Is you're not saved for yourself. Like God didn't save you for you. Yes and amen, he loves you.
Yeah, for sure.
And like desires to be with you, but it doesn't stop with you.
No.
Right? Like it's meant to be beyond you. And if you get saved and then your faith is just about you, like that's a problem.
Well, because then it's not faith. Like that's not what he calls us to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Jesus, the thing that he did with the disciples was go bring more people into the kingdom.
Yeah. It says to go and make disciples.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just, hey, you're saved, now let's work on you and you go inward and it's all about you. It's like, no, it's go and make disciples, which means you're going to be becoming a disciple in that process. But he doesn't say also go fix yourself and get everything cleaned up and then go make disciples.
Right.
He's like, go and make disciples.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Rachel, my wife, said this first. I think she's the first person I heard it from that I can recall. Is Christians are, I think the world thinks and we think as Christians, like a Christian is someone who's got it together. But Christians are the only people in the world who can be okay not having it together.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just you don't have to get it all sorted out before you go do the things Jesus asked you to do.
Yeah.
And it's tempting to want to, / it's more comfortable. I think truthfully, it's like just the way discipleship has it looks in the church right now is let's talk about you. And rather than let's talk about how you are helping or going to. And let's make a game plan for how you're going to live this out outwardly instead of let's just talk about your problems and how Jesus can fix them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting as you talk about that, because I think when you talk about how we look like we have it all together, really that's a worldly thing to look like you have it all together.
Yeah.
Right? To want to act like things are okay. And you'll hear people in business that talk about this where they'll say, yeah, really everybody's figuring it out. No one really knows what they're doing. We're all just trying to figure it out. And they're being vulnerable in that piece. Yeah. Well, that should be the Christian model, is no, I don't have it all together. I don't have it figured out, but here's where I found freedom. Here's what Jesus has taught me. and walk alongside. Let me show you the path to that freedom.
Yeah.
And we can't do that outside of being vulnerable and sharing that and speaking that and teaching that. And if we act like we have it all together, then before we teach someone else, then we're not going to ever get there. We're not going to ever be able to lead someone down that path. And then they're also going to think that they have to have it all together.
Right. It's
And
confusing.
it is very confusing. And because there's going to be times, I mean, I'm 37. I think you're 37, you're 38.
I'm about to be 37.
You're almost 37. That's right. You're younger. I always forget that you're younger than me. You just
We're the
old soul.
same age,
Old soul.
Andy.
You're an old soul. Yeah, I know. We're the same age. Once you get older, it just is what it is.
Yeah.
But I know that even as I walk in freedom with the Lord, there are going to be times in my life where it feels like things are falling apart. It feels like things aren't going well. I mean, I might be 55, 56, 50. We're always walking through different seasons with the Lord. And if I choose to just act like I have it all together in those pieces, or that like, man, I've really grown in these last 3 years and I've got it figured out now.
Yeah.
Well, then I've lost the walk. Like I'm not walking towards Jesus anymore and walking in vulnerability. And so anyways, I think that's a little bit of a side note, but I think in that with discipleship, it's teaching vulnerability. It's teaching people to walk towards Jesus and realize that, hey, we're just going to learn how to walk this life together. And I have freedom in this area, so walk with me. This is where I found it with Jesus, so walk with me, and I'm going to teach you how to walk that road rather than, let's sit down, let's have a cup of coffee, you tell me what's going on, and then I'm going to speak back to you what that is. And it's honestly, this might rub some people the wrong way. It's one of the reasons that I struggled with counseling a lot. And I think counseling is good. So let me be clear in that. It's very good.
Yeah.
And it does help. And professionals know what they're doing in this. And I think a lot of times it's problem focused and inward focused without any action to actually move forward and grow and change and heal.
Yeah.
Because change and healing doesn't happen without action. It doesn't happen without actually putting steps to it and then walking through life rather than just looking at the problem and focusing on the problem. We have to look at the solution, which is Jesus, and then walking those steps towards freedom. And we can do that in discipleship. I mean, Jesus has everything that we need, everything.
Right.
And so if we can walk this road of discipleship with people, we can actually walk them towards the freedom that we have, and then they can walk the next person towards the freedom that they found, and we just walk life together.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if I've ever asked this question, but like if you were thinking about discipleship and you had to tell somebody, this is the one thing that you need to be doing to live your life with Jesus. Like, obviously it's nuanced in like trying to listen to the Lord on a day-to-day basis. And God, in my experience, is that he puts his finger on lots of things but like to obey. But how would you describe, or what would be the thing that you would use to describe primarily what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus?
To walk with Jesus.
Because that's what we're trying to describe, right? As discipleship is to look like Christ.
Yeah. Well, my first thought is that I heard a friend of mine, Jeremy Payton, pastor in town, it said that Jesus is always drawing us back to himself and to community. And so first off in discipleship, I would say it's to be with Jesus. And
Are you going to give me two things?
I am going to give you two things. Yeah, I'm not. There's no one here. We're going two.
Yeah.
But I think it shows. I think the reason for two, and just because I don't like one, the reason for two is that I don't want to just say go to Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. I want to explain what that looks like and what that means, and then also I believe going to Jesus is walking in community. And that's how we disciple. So I think that there is this, it's going to be one answer in two. Okay. But what I would say is that the first step of discipleship is to be discipled by Jesus. It's not going to someone else to get discipled. It's to be discipled by Jesus. We all need to be discipled by Jesus.
Yeah.
And so we need to learn to go to him first. And so the first thing that I would say, the first step in discipleship is to spend time in the Word every day. And it doesn't mean that we need to go read a yearly Bible plan on the first day that we open up the book. I'm actually working with a guy right now and told him, hey, go read Psalm 23 every day. That's it. Just read Psalm 23 and then journal your thoughts.
Why was it? Was that specific to him, or is that your recommendation?
That was more specific to him, but I've also just seen the Lord. He's spoken so much to me through that psalm.
Yeah.
It's been a pretty powerful psalm in my own life. Because if all of the words in that are true, it should cause us to live differently. I mean, you could say that about the whole Bible, but that psalm especially is just so powerful in what it says about him leading us beside still waters, restoring our soul. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. So we can walk through anything and not fear evil.
Yeah.
But it's because he is with me. His rod and his staff, they comfort me. Like there's just so much in that one, and it's 6 verses. So it's really short. It's really easy to just read through. And it's a well-known psalm, but what happens in Christianity, I would say, especially in Christianity in Western culture, is like that's just a nice thing that we read, and then we don't look at the depth of what, man, if all of this is true, like the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
How should I live?
Yeah. And there's another version of that was in my son's Bible of the Lord is my shepherd, I have what I need.
I have everything I need.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, if I just stop at verse 1, man, that should bring a lot of peace.
And change a lot of things.
And change a ton of things and a ton of the ways that we live.
Yeah.
And so, so with him, that's where I told him to start, because when I started walking towards Jesus again, surrendering towards Jesus, or when I surrendered to Jesus, I just read the verse of the day every day. That was because he told me to spend time with him every day. So my first job was to spend time with him every day. And how do you do that when you've not done it for so long? Is to just read a verse, create the habit, start. And that's where discipleship begins. Because if Jesus doesn't disciple us and just change our hearts, then it doesn't really matter what the other person says. Now, someone can lead us towards Jesus, so don't get me wrong in what I'm saying there, and that's really the second step of this. But Jesus has to be our main leader.
It's really good because it's, I think I even just thought, as you said, someone can lead us toward Jesus. But really, like, if you look at Scripture, there's like Paul's mentoring and discipling. But if you look at Jesus and the way that worked with the disciples, which I would be hard to not argue that's the model.
Yeah.
The people that the disciples brought to Jesus were people who had not yet acknowledged Jesus as Lord and Savior, right? Or who they went to were people who had not yet acknowledged Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And then those people didn't follow the disciples, they followed Jesus. And then Jesus, of course, did all the Jesus things that he did with those people and said the things he said and showed them the way it looked to walk with God. But it's not like our job in the church to carry a Christian to Jesus. Like, I think we can be with them, but we can't do it for them.
No.
Right?
No, yeah, we can't. We can't do that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, if your walk with the Lord, if our walk with the Lord is reliant, if my walk with the Lord is reliant on you, then it's not a walk with the Lord, it's a walk with Dan.
Yeah.
Now, you might be pointing me towards Jesus, right? You're following Jesus. But I shouldn't need you to be able to follow Jesus. Which sounds interesting, right? Because it is that second piece that I talked about with 2 points, and now we're just getting into one. Yeah. Well done.
Didn't do that.
Yeah, is that's the second piece of it, is walking in community. It's not the first piece of it. Yeah. And Jesus will lead us to that community. I mean, I've had mentors, still have mentors. I'm sure you have mentors. However, when you meet with Jesus, it's you and Jesus. You're spending time with the Lord. You're asking the Lord about things. You're asking him to be your leader and to teach you the ways that you should go. I think, it gets to another piece of discussion, and it's maybe not in the discipleship aspect of stuff, but when we walk with the Lord, a lot of times we will be like, okay, I'm going to go do this and do this and do this and do this. Oh, I forgot to pray. Oh, I need to bring, It's like, no, we go to the Lord so then he can disciple us and show us where he wants us to walk.
Yeah.
And then we go and we learn in that, and we can learn how to, hey, I have talked to the Lord and I can go make a decision and he'll guide me and teach me. Mm-hmm. But we have to learn to go to him first so that we can learn to walk with him, and then go to somebody else that's maybe further along in that journey with the Lord that can help teach us and walk us. I think he'll guide us to that person.
Yeah. I remember I've been in a traditional job my whole life, and I have friends who are pastors, and I remember talking to one of them, and he was like, yeah, I spent this much time praying, and I remember being jealous. I was like, wow, I want to have part of my job being, of course he prays. It's like part of his job and expectations.
Yeah.
And then I was like driving home, and I was thinking about that, and I realized like God was like, well, it can be part of your job. Mm-hmm. And, and it's oh yeah, I can just like have that be part of my job description, that I ask the Lord to be a part of the work that I do. Mind blown,
Yeah.
And but it is true. Like, I thought, and we think that, there's this secular Christian divide of like, well, they can function and be that way because they're in a Christian role, workplace, whatever.
Yeah.
Versus like, I can function and be this way or I can't because I'm in a secular role. But then you think about someone like Daniel, who was very much in a secular job, but did it in a non-secular way, and the impact that had. And it's like, man, okay, I can break down the divide. And that's not what we're talking about. But I was just thinking about that, like, as you were talking, it's easy to let the world define for me what my relationship with the Lord should look like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which you don't have to do.
No, we don't have to do. And it's interesting, and maybe this will take the conversation a different way, but there's a cost to discipleship, right? Daniel had a big cost to his discipleship. Just a little.
Yeah.
Just a little, right? He chose to walk with the Lord in a secular place. And he could have chosen to not do that. He could have chosen to just do it the way that everybody does it, and then, pray on his own time and spend time with Jesus on his own time. But that's not the call of the Lord. And discipleship is not just this simple road that's easy in it. It's why we need the community piece of that, right? To learn how to walk it. But the Lord calls us to be in the world, but not of the world.
Yeah.
And to walk towards him and to do everything as unto the Lord. So in our jobs, what we're doing. And if we're in a career that's secular, that to still spend the time with the Lord and to bring him into the decisions that we make and to walk that way. I mean, I was blessed in the last year to work for a Christian boss, right? Where I could take pauses and spend time in silence. But if I was working for a different boss, why would I not still do that?
Yeah.
And still spend time with the Lord? Obviously still honoring the job, but honoring the Lord above the job.
Right.
And doing what he asks me to do within that, and to bring him into every place that I go because he's in me and he's with me. And yet we're like, well, no, I'm in this workplace. I have to do it this way, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And it doesn't mean that you have to go like do this, but truth does, it does cut, right? It's a sword. And so that will happen when we walk with the Lord, and there's a cost to that. And Daniel had that. He chose to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the cost piece quite a bit. I think a lot of people in America, my experience has been discipling people, is they get, there's the phrase like, what you win them through is what you win them to. And I think a lot of people get won to Jesus in America through grace, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like the grace of the Lord is available. But there's no, like Jesus also says, the cost of discipleship is a real thing. And, he says, like, who among you would build something without first considering the cost,
cost.
or go to war without first considering the cost. And like the cost is your life and all that you have. And I don't think a lot of people hear that before they like say, I want to follow Jesus. And then they get into it and they're like, wait a second, this feels like a bait and switch.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like part of the issue in like what we would talk about in discipleship, is that the cost isn't realized. And so then when it is asked, it's like, well, I didn't sign up for that.
Yeah.
And if you aren't willing to pay the cost yourself, like again, caught, not taught, and showing that like, man, the man who sold all he had to buy the field, like that Jesus is worth the price.
Yeah.
If my life doesn't reflect that, then why would anyone buy it? Right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's convicting for me of like, okay, because when I actually read the words of Jesus, like get discipled by Jesus, I'm like, this is radical.
Yeah. It is radical.
Like this doesn't look like what the people in the like great like church look like. Like it's not a societal norm.
No.
And then I start to process that. I'm like, and then I have to, honestly, this is what happens. Just being honest. I get to the point where I'm like, I can't keep going down that thought path. I'm not ready for that. And so then I stop it, because it's like, oh, whoa. Because there's part of me that's like the tension of like, oh, I've got five kids and a wife. I'm responsible for providing, but Jesus said he provides. And then am I intervening in their relationship with the Lord by being the person they trust for provision versus the Lord? And like, I just get all wrapped up in this.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait, this is scary. I'll just put this on hold. And, but like the cost of discipleship is significant and it's radical. And it's hard to like put that in front of somebody if it's not in me.
Yeah.
Like if I haven't paid that price.
So how do you pay that price when you start going down that?
Well, I haven't, like, I would say the ways that Jesus is talking to me right now is like, I just keep getting afraid of it. I honestly don't know what it looks like. Like one practical example that I've thought about is in my work, I have my own business, and I can determine who my customers are in a way, right? Like I can say yes or no. It's like if I really felt like Jesus, what he said is like, seek first the kingdom and everything will be added to you. If I really believe that, then wouldn't I take clients who are building the kingdom? Like, why would I have a client that I'm helping that what is being built isn't the kingdom?
Yeah.
But the answer to that question, why, is, well, I need a paycheck.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's really, I would like say, I don't need the pay, like God's got it. Like, I don't, it's like, you feel, I get just even just trying to explain it, I'm like, I feel the tension of like, is it wise to do that? And like, but Jesus, it's black and white, he's like, seek first the kingdom. He doesn't make caveats.
None.
That I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I don't know of any caveats Jesus makes. He says you make caveats, or God gave you an out. Like I remember talking to the Pharisees about like, well, he said we could get divorced. And he's like, he did that for you because you couldn't handle it, basically.
Yeah.
But like, Jesus isn't functioning in that way.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's like just real where I'm at.
Oh man. Thanks for bringing that up. Well, it's just interesting because I was just talking about this last weekend. I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah.
Is we will talk about these things in discipleship with the Lord until it hits a real point, until it hits a real thing. And I was talking with a group of men about, and again, this applies to me too, is where what you serve when things get really difficult and you see where you run to. And this is a little bit different than what you're talking about and what he's calling you into, but there's a little bit of the same in that, where it's like, I will do that until it might cost me a paycheck, or I might have to actually look at what that looks like to trust in the Lord, to have faith in that he will provide. And there's times where, with faith is actually having to trust. We have to walk. So faith doesn't mean like I pray and then it's given to me right then. There's not a lot of faith when you just pray and then it's right then. It's like a lot of times it's pray and then we wait.
Yeah.
And wait. And wait.
To the last second.
And pray again.
Yeah.
And pray again. And pray again. And pray again. And again, his provision also might look different than what we think it's going to look like, but that's the cost of discipleship. And if he's really the provider, then he will provide in the way that we need the provision. And it comes back to Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I have what I need. Only goodness and mercy will follow you every day of your life. So that's not just today, it's tomorrow, it's the next day, it's every day of your life. Mm-hmm. And if he's going to make us lie down in green pastures, he's going to lead us beside still waters, and it applies to that same verse that you're talking about. He's going to do it.
Yeah.
He's the shepherd. He's the one leading the sheep. I'm not the sheep that's in front of the shepherd going, hey, follow me.
Yeah, I found this cool new pasture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like it's not how it works.
I almost made a sheep noise.
I actually almost did too. I really wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about the Old Testament model of the Israelites and the high places, mm-hmm. and how a lot of them got left. Like they reformed, mm-hmm. but they didn't like seek out and find all the high places and the strongholds that existed in Israel. And it's just like the prayer in my heart was, which I honestly think it was the Holy Spirit, because I wasn't reading that story, and it just came to my mind. It was like, God, would you help me to identify and break down the strongholds, like the high places? And these are like places of worship for them. They're not like throwaway places. They're important. And like, what are those in my life? What are the strongholds? Because there's, when they stay, they get used the wrong way again. Mm-hmm. But that's the cost of discipleship, is like all these strongholds have to, like, every single one of them has to go.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's just like, oh man, okay. All right, Jesus. Like, cause before he says like the cost of discipleship is the, count the cost, who would build, who would go to war. Before that, he says like, whoever doesn't leave his family.
Yeah.
Woof, man. It's like, okay.
And those are good things.
And they're from him.
Yeah. But they're always under him.
And so anyways, the rubber meets the road thing is like, it's really real, and it's really kind of scary. And I feel like a crazy person. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I'm also like simultaneous. Sorry, this is just like I'm verbally processing.
Yeah,
I'm also simultaneously like I'm reading this book called Dominion, which is the history of the influence of the Christian church on the world by this non-Christian historian.
Yeah,
and all the people along the way that have like shaped where we are today were completely and entirely sold out for who Jesus was and what he asked them to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, do I want to like have an influence for the kingdom? Oh, I have to like be completely committed to that.
Yeah.
Anyways, I like even stop myself now from talking about it, because like if I say it out loud, then it's like, oh, okay, that looks really different. I have to like give that up. Once you say it out loud, it's like, am I going to be a liar or a hypocrite? So it's like, I don't even want to say it out loud, the things. Anyways.
But I think this brings it back to the community piece of stuff is, for one, you're being vulnerable on a podcast here. But I think that's the piece is sometimes we don't even want to say it out loud that these are the things and that we're wrestling with it. The walk of sanctification is, we're going to be wrestling with things throughout our whole lives because he's calling us into a deeper, deeper union with him. I mean, that's really what it is, right? Union with Jesus. And then walking that path with him. And there's other sides to this, right? With family, like they are under him, right? Leave your father and mother and come after me. But there's also a call, like there's a flip side to that of you could also take that verse and do what I've seen happen in churches and other families, but churches where pastors are so devoted to the church, they're not devoted to their family at all. And then their kids go this way we see those things happen, and that's not a judgment. That's just like, you can watch that. You can see those things happen. And that's not the call of the Lord either.
Yeah.
When he says to, have your family under him. And so there is this wrestling piece of that, right? And I think that that's the part where it's really just living in surrender. Like, you have my family. So what are you calling me to do with them? What are you calling me to do as the leader of the family, which is really just like, they're under you. I'm following you. So you tell me as the real leader how to steward this well and how to steward. And then, it brings that back to discipleship too, right? Of stewardship. And everything that we have is from the Lord. Anything, everything. None of it we got on our own accord. That's another thing in this world. It's like, I earned it. It's like, well, you might have worked hard for it, but it was still given to you by the Lord. He gave you that. And so it's to steward and do those things. But anyways, that's more of a side the point, because I do want to be clear that God does call us to love our families well and to lead, and he's given them to us to steward. And so, which that too, but it is this wrestling, right? Of, well, I've got to trust that the Lord will provide for my family and that I'm not the one, that he will just show me the things that he wants me to do if he wants me to do anything. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But then when we're walking through this process, to get back to what you're talking about, I think it brings it back to community when we start to walk into these really difficult, hard discussions about the depth of what the Lord calls us into and why he asks us to walk it with other people. Because if I'm walking that by myself with the Lord, and again, a lot of people have walked a lot of things alone. Moses walked a lot of things alone.
He did. He had Aaron.
And then he had Aaron, yeah. But there were people with him, right?
But yeah, he was very much one amongst, the crowd. Yeah,
exactly. And there is some, what I would say, loneliness in that from a human perspective. Yeah. And it can be scary as a leader in that, but you're right. Like when he was like, I can't do that. I can't speak. I can't do. Okay, well, here's your brother. He'll walk with you. Mm-hmm. He'll do those things with you, but you're still going to go do what I asked you to do.
Yeah.
And I think God's just kind. God is so kind. He's so much kinder than we think he is. So much kinder. All we have to look at is that he sent Jesus to die for us to see his kindness. Mm-hmm. But I think we forget that when we start to walk into these things. We're like, he's asking me to do such a hard thing. Yeah, but he'll do it in the kindest way possible to get you to that point. Mm-hmm. It might not feel that way in here, but he'll do it in a really incredible, kind way. He's calling me right now into walking into some deeper things again to work through. I'm going to go start this soul care. We were just talking about this soul care with a group of brothers. Well, he didn't just ask me. I've been wanting to read that by myself for a long time. Well, now I have 12 guys to read through it with and do the work in it with. And that's kind.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to have to walk it alone. And even if I was by myself, it would be with the Lord. But the Lord he just knows us as humans, and he created us to connect and to be in community together. And so when he asks us to walk through these deep things, like with you didn't just share that by yourself. You just shared that with me and actually probably, a few other people.
I don't like, I'm sharing it, like with the people that like my wife and
yeah.
But it is like, man, once I say it out loud, this is like, I have to mean what I say. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's a work in progress, but I feel the undercurrent of it, of like what Jesus is doing. And it does excite. It's like, okay, I can, like in this whole evangelism thing that I also feel really compelled towards of like, okay, this is the point. Like what else could I do that's worth my time? Nothing. And like, let me just go tell people about Jesus. If like I've already given the stuff up, I got nothing to lose at that point.
Yeah.
And so it's like, maybe it's the chicken or the egg. Like I could just go do that and lose it all, or I could like give it up ahead of time and do the thing. But anyways, it's like I do what I know in my heart, like the phrase that's in my heart and my mind is, I know that Jesus is the only thing that really satisfies.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are so many things that I can justify.
Yeah. Same here.
And that I do. Like, oh, this is good because. But they aren't Jesus.
No.
And so it's like, okay, how do I get to the point where I like stop justifying the things and just view them and trust them to be what they were and the way that Jesus described them, and put them in front of us in his word.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that cost of discipleship that we talked about previously too, he gives things when we give up our life and choose to walk in his way, he also gives promises to that. It's not just this like,
it's not masochism.
No. Yeah. And it's scary. Like, especially the one that you're talking about is scary to look at, like, what does that practically look like? However, if God's calling you to that, it might be hard and difficult, but he's going to bring his peace and provision and joy and freedom. He doesn't just call us into those things the circumstances might be hard, but he's going to give us the gifts of him and the kingdom, like that. He will give us himself. And when we lose our lives, we actually find it. That's biblical as well. And so it's just interesting as we talk about discipleship. It's like, it's hard and it's difficult and there's a cost, but that's where freedom's found. And that's how we walk towards freedom, is by becoming a disciple.
Yeah.
It would be terrible for our lives. This is the path that I was on. And it's the grace of God that he did all the things that he did to my life to get me to surrender. And again, it's a continual surrender. But it's the grace of God that he did that, because it would be terrible to live our whole lives as a Christian and never have freedom. And that's what most of us do. Yeah. That's what I did for 35 years, is be a Christian. 24, I guess I was 11, but like to be a Christian and have zero freedom in my life, to be controlled by things my whole life. And when the rubber hit the road, I went to those things. Yeah. Because I didn't have freedom. I wasn't walking as a disciple. And so the cost of our life actually brings fullness of life to the full. And that's what discipleship's about. That's why we do it. That's why we walk towards Jesus, and why we want to bring other people along in that. Because both aren't great, right? To not know Jesus is not a good ending. So I want to be clear in what I say. But it's just as awful to be one where he's like, you'll get to the spot where you look to him and he says, I did not know you.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to know him.
Yeah.
And I got to walk with him to know him.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jesus, like, he wasn't, if you read his words, he was like very regularly trying to get rid of people who didn't want to pay the cost.
Yeah.
It's like, eat my flesh and drink my blood. And people are like, that's disgusting. Yeah. And I don't want to do that. And I'm out.
Yeah.
And it's like, or count the cost, pick up your cross and follow me. And people are like, I'm out. And I think like there's this posture in our discipleship in the Christian church right now of like, let me make sure I don't offend you so that you stay near, so that there's a chance that you will know Jesus. And it's like, no. Let me tell you the truth, that there's a cost of your life to follow Jesus. You go wrestle that out with the Lord.
Yeah.
I don't need to be your person, but I do need to tell you the truth in love and push you to Jesus, to where that, like, I don't know if I've shared this already on this podcast. Forrest Frank, he's all the rage these days.
Yeah.
In his album Child of God, the first track is not a song, it's a testimony. And I think it's his grandpa at like a Billy Graham crusade or something. I don't actually know. I think that's what it is. And anyways, I love it. It's like been stuck in my brain because he the story he tells is that he was dropping his kids off at Sunday school, and this guy at the church was like, "Hey, why are you here?" And he's like, "Well, because, for my kids to, be in Sunday school." And he's like, "Well, if there's something here for them, don't you think there'd be something here for you?" And in the testimony, the guy's like, the audacity of that guy, like to tell me that. He was mad about it.
Yeah.
And he went home mad about it. And he's like, and I tried to find a way to be able to have the Lord and play golf on Sundays. And the reason I love it is, he says later, I was talking to the Lord, and I asked him to help. And he's like, I was driving on the freeway in LA, and you know what happened? Nothing. I didn't see a heavenly choir. I didn't see a new way forward, just driving on the freeway. He's like, but I went home that night and someone changed my book. He's like, I understood things in the Bible I'd never understood before. And the reason is man, this guy said a hard thing to this guy to get him to think about the cost. Mm-hmm. And because he did desire Jesus, he went and worked that out with God. And God is faithful. Yeah. Right? Yeah. But I don't have to be that for people. No. And that's with this discipleship thing, I'm so tempted to be the thing for them, to be their solution rather than tell them the truth. When I reflect on all the different relationships I've had in discipleship, I almost 100% across the board wish I would have spoken the truth in love more and cared less about what they thought of me.
Yeah.
And just push people to Jesus over and over and over again to go wrestle it out and be okay, you don't like that. Go talk to the Lord about it. And if they genuinely desire God, they will.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they'll walk away.
Yep.
And it's just truth is, you said it, it cuts. But if it's not spoken, there's people are just going to be in relationship with Jesus with no cost.
Yeah.
Which isn't real.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, let's end it there. There's one thing that you said in there that I want to end it with for today is I wish that I would have thought less about what they think of me and just shared the truth.
Yeah.
Well, that's true surrender, right? Is learning to let go of what people think of me because we're laying our life down. We're picking up our cross and following him to death. And that means that now I can live free.
Yeah.
Because it's not about what they think of me. It's about presenting the gospel and sharing Jesus so that they can find the freedom that I have in him and find him. Not find me, find him, which is what you just said. And that's discipleship.
Right.
That's hey, I found this.
This is what it costs. Come
with me.
Come with me. Go to Jesus. Let's go. Let's follow him together. But this is what it costs.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.